There we go. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Facebook Live with the American Stroke Foundation. My name is Muzna. I'm an occupational therapist. Today we are going to talk about memory and potential changes after the stroke. So this live Q&A is part of oh, we ruined the surprise. This live Q&A is part of the American Stroke Foundation's virtual Next Step program. Our Next Step program is designed to help and support stroke survivors and their caregivers in the ongoing challenges after stroke, and our virtual offerings are to help reach everyone who can't access our in-person programs. So for more information, please visit our website at americanstroke.org. There you'll find links to our YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram pages, and also a link to our blog. And I want to introduce the newest member of the American Stroke Foundation family. This is for likes. Say hi, Gabby. Hi. This is Gabby. She's a certified occupational therapy assistant. She hasn't learned to see her reflection yet, or she's kind of like me. Oh, or do you see yourself? Say hi to everyone. Say hi to everyone. Gabby and I just met this morning, so. So let's start getting those questions and comments about memory. I'm going to hand her off now, because I don't want her to be more popular than me. Bye, cats. Bye, cats. Okay. So please say hello. Let us know where you're from, where you're joining us from, and start submitting your questions and comments and your experience related to memory changes. So memory is, I'm sure, as anyone who's experienced challenges with it, both as a stroke survivor, but the general memory challenges that we talk about day to day, or as we get older. Memory in general, we can just describe it as a process of taking in information from around the world, processing it, storing it, and then being able to recall it later when we need it for real life. So that is the most, that's just the foundation of memory. We can make it more technical, but for the purposes of this Q&A, we don't need to, okay? So Claudia says hello from Rhode Island. Hello, Claudia, welcome. So if you are joining us as a stroke survivor, a caregiver, or a medical professional, please start submitting any questions you have to memory. Like with anything we've talked about in the series so far, there's the challenges related to what we talk about, memory in this case, that we all experience on a day-to-day basis, and then there's the added layer of complexity that happens when you have had a stroke. And so when you're talking about memory and how it's changed for you, it's important to take an inventory of what was your memory performance like before the stroke, and what has gotten more noticeable, or what is new related to memory after the stroke, right? We can't expect our memory performance to be to get to a point and a level that it never was, because that's just not our baseline. So it's important to tease out those factors. And also, memory strategies, the simplest one, or I should say a frequent one that's recommended, is writing things down. It's not, reframing that, right? You're doing those things to reduce your cognitive load, to free up resources to spend on things that are more important than remembering a grocery list. So you want to think of your strategies as strengths. You've identified a situation that takes an amount of energy that it doesn't need to, and you're streamlining it. That's awesome. Using strategies is a plus. It's not, something that, oh, I have to use this because there's something wrong with my memory. So I feel like that, reframing is important, because, not everyone is able to have the insight or put into place strategies. So if you are, that's awesome. Allison says good morning from Texas. Ruby is good morning from Shreveport. Linda is good morning from California. Ooh, all over the place. I like it. Okay. Let's start hearing those questions and comments related to your memory. So memory in general, we can break down into 4 stages. So the first stage is attention. You have to pay attention to what's going on to you in the world in order for it to be processed. If you're not focused and you're not concentrating, then the information you're taking in is less likely to go into memory. It's more likely to be in that temporary brain space where it's not going to be useful later on. So attention and memory go hand in hand. They're distinct in several ways, but it's also an overlap. And the overlap is you first have to be paying attention to what it is that you're going to want to be remembering. The second stage of memory is called encoding. So encoding is how the memories will actually be formed. So the physical and the sensory input that's coming into your brain gets transformed into a representation that can be stored in your memory. So we get a lot of multisensory stimuli, and it has to be translated in a way that your brain can recall. So we have different areas of the brain that are related to seeing things versus feeling things versus hearing things. And so whatever it is in our world, that's broken down into its component pieces, and it goes to where it needs to go in the brain for it to be retrieved in a meaningful way. The third stage of memory is called storage. Storage refers to how our memories are retained and saved for later. So the encoded information goes into memory, and the maintenance of information is also in this phase. The last stage of memory we can think of as retrieval. Retrieval is how our memories are recalled, or the recovery of stored information from our memory. So the information moves from where it's stored to the conscious part of our brain so that we can actually use it in our thinking process. We can retrieve our memories through recall or recognition. Recall is remembering it with no context or cues. Recognition is retrieving those memories with a cue. Hi, Christina Alvarez from Kansas. She is one of our participants at the mission site. My daily memory was great, organized, and targeted. Now I think I'm okay, but I have a harder time being organized. Is it ever going to be organized? So, Christina, are you talking about is like the process of organizing your day going to get better, or is your memory itself going to be organized? So organization of memory is both a conscious and an unconscious process. So the organization in terms of how it's encoded and how it's processed, that we don't necessarily have control over. But in terms of how we use that memory and how we affect the strategies we use for attention, that we have control over. So, there's memory for things you're working on right now, like at the moment, but that you don't need to store necessarily. So that's called working memory, the stuff that's in our immediate attention. Then there's the short-term memory, like what did I have for lunch? What did I do last week? Things like that. And then long-term memory is like childhood stuff and, remembering names from people you've met throughout your life, things like that. And then, memory like, forgetting your keys or forgetting where you parked, stuff like that, which can fall into, short-term or working memory. So in terms of memory organization, you want to look at where the difficulties are happening and what the priority of that information is, right? There are definitely strategies and ways to make it more organized if it comes to like daily habits and routines, like going out the door and making sure that you've got your keys and your wallet and your water and your medicine and all that stuff. They're definitely strategies to make that more organized and consistent. The most relevant strategy for that is the fact that that's a routine that happens every single day, right? So if it's a process of leaving the house, for most people that happens every day. For most people, you need the same things as you go out the door. So putting things in the same place or making a list that's on your garage door wherever you exit. Those are doable because the routine doesn't change. Now, if you're talking about organization and memory for things that to manage things that happen as they occur. So you make a new appointment, or you run into and meet a new person, or you find a great resource. Like remembering those things, you want to experiment with different tools and have your system. So some people use the voice memo on their phone, and as soon as something happens that they need to quote unquote remember, they use that voice memo system and organize it at the end of the day. So that's just one example. Let's see, Gail. Gail is from Kansas and says her memory is awful. Okay, so Gail, do you have any specific examples or any specific questions? anytime someone describes their memory as a challenge, they're often referring, obviously, to, memory is multifactorial. So it's often one or two situations that continually present themselves as a challenging situation. So you really want to, it's situation specific. And then Christina says it's more of prioritizing. Yeah. So for prioritizing, just like when you prioritize your energy levels and what you do during the day, you want to do that with memory too, right? Like, is it a priority to have your grocery list memorized when you could make a list and save those resources for something that you can't make a list for, right? You don't get a prize necessarily for walking into a grocery store without a list coming out, without, with everything on it just from memory. I mean, it could be a source of pride, but cost benefit analysis. Like, let me make a list for the things that I can make a list for, and then let me free up the resources for maybe remembering what I learned when I went to a support group, or what I learned, when I, throughout the day when I get new information. But Christina, we can talk more about that when I see you next, or if you have more specific questions, please feel free to ask them. Aaron says, had a memory thing yesterday. Someone came up to me yesterday and asked if I remembered him. I said, honestly, no. I had a stroke and my memory, I lost the message. Where is it? I had a stroke and my memory sucked. Who was he? Turns out I worked with him 15 to 30 years ago. So much has come back in my memory today. Yeah, so that just shows the power of memory, right? Although you may not remember something in the instant you're asked to remember it, once those details start coming, it triggers like a cascade of other things, because it pings off all the areas in your brain that's related to that memory. That's why it's so great that the brain breaks down that information and puts it in all the relevant areas, so that your brain is recruiting as much as possible to help you retrieve that memory when you need it. People forget things. I mean, forgetting things is in itself not a problem. That's a fact of human function, and every instance of forgetting is not a reflection of a symptom from your stroke. That's important to remember too. People forget. If we didn't forget, we wouldn't have room for new memories. Sometimes we think of forgetting as the opposite of remembering, but I remember a few years, okay. I'm the only one who makes myself laugh. A few years ago, there was a great New York Times article, and I can link it in the Facebook chat. There was a great article in the New York Times that talked about how forgetting is not the opposite of remembering. And it was referring to people who win like national, international competitions on memory. So they remember like an insane sequence of cards or something like that. And they use a strategy called the memory palace, which is essentially that they walk themselves through a familiar place, whether it's their house or somewhere they've been to, and they put the cards at different entrances. So instead of remembering a sequence of 20 cards is small compared to what they remembered, say 500 cards or whatever, they would walk through the house. And as they walk through the house, that's what triggers their memory. They associate the card or the number with a place that's familiar to them. So they're remembering the familiar place. They're not remembering the sequence of cards. And then the most important part of the memory function was that once that contest was over, they no longer remembered the cards. They were able to put that away. So forgetting is an adaptive function of the human mind. It's only when it makes it inconvenient or makes it challenging for us to do our daily activities that we want to look at it and streamline it. So working smarter, not harder. Okay. So yeah, like if, running into people all the time, like I have the worst, and I don't know where necessarily it comes from, but I forget names the second I'm introduced to someone. It just doesn't, and I've tried the strategies of like repeating the name and stuff like that, but that initial introduction is not how my brain works. So I've come up with other strategies in the meantime, but it's okay. It's a lot less awkward than you think to just tell someone you don't remember them. That's not where you want to put your energy. Claudia says, I find it hard reading. I was always an avid reader, but now it bores me. Yeah, so that's a frequent experience that people who've had a stroke report. And the thing about remembering when reading is that sometimes it's not so much a memory problem as a vision problem. So if your vision, which as we talked about in a prior Facebook Live, vision is more than just eyesight. Vision is your brain taking in the information through its eyes and then doing something with it. If you're having a vision related issue, you're not going to remember what you read because your brain is spending all the energy on that process from page to eyes to brain. So I would make sure that you have a recent and comprehensive eye exam and then go and try your reading and see how it is. But there are different strategies. One thing that you can do as a starting point is Google like remembering what you read, or college study strategies to remember what you read. And there are different techniques. I forget the name of the strategy, but there's one where you form 2 columns on the left side, and as you read, you like write a summary sentence or a cueing sentence on the left side. I can find a link to it and send that out too. But there are different strategies. So what I would Google is literally college study strategies, and you'll find a lot of good strategies for memory retention when reading. But I do highly suggest that you make sure your vision is on point, because that's a big common thread that I've seen. Okay, Gail says, it's like I can't tell you what happened 2 days ago. Yeah. So in that situation, you know, what information is relevant, you know, that you need to recall 2 days ago, right? Is it because it makes conversation awkward when you can't recall like details of the day, or is it because, you know, so much happens day to day that you need to be able to recall, like for a doctor's appointment or something like that? So journaling is a great way, or keeping a daily schedule, because then you have something to refer to. It's like we are in a go like 24-hour cycle. That's just the way, you know, the world around us is, and it's very hard to slow down. So it is, the days can blend together, especially if the rest of your wellness foundation is not on the sturdiest ground. So if you're not sleeping well, memories aren't going to be encoded as well, because your brain is working on other stuff, such as making sure you're breathing, managing your pain while you sleep, sorting through your thoughts that you kind of didn't have time for, didn't want to make time for during the day. And so memories, as frustrating as daily memory challenges are, it's going to be on the lowest point on the totem pole when it comes to your brain's priorities if you're doing other things that cause a chronic state of stress: sleep, pain, not nourishing your body, not moving your body. So making a daily schedule, that way you have something to refer to. It'd be really hard for anyone, I think, even, you know, doctors and medical professionals, to, you know, exactly remember, hey, like yesterday or 2 days ago, did I do everything? Did I take my medicine? How many steps did I walk? What did I eat? And it's better if you keep a log anyways, that way you have information to discuss with your doctor. So try a daily schedule, and maybe a small journaling exercise at the end of the day, and then you have stuff to refer to. Again, offload the stuff that comes up regularly. That's the easiest way to start with anything. What is the recurring challenging situation that makes you feel like memory has been a challenge after your stroke? Start there. Gail says long term is a little better. Yeah. You know, there are lots of reasons for that. Obviously, some people have situations, not necessarily after a stroke, but other kind of brain injuries where long-term is affected more. But long-term, you know, your brain has had more chance to sit with that memory. It has other memories that are more recent attached to it. It's just on more solid ground from a brain perspective. So it's usually easier to recall that. Now, I have worked with stroke survivors where long-term is severely is impacted in a way that interferes with daily life just as much as working in short-term memory. And it's frustrating because in that case, what the challenge is and what the, you know, why it's sad for the stroke survivor is because it impacts the connection to their loved ones, right? If you can't remember a family wedding, or if you can't remember meaningful moments in your child's you know, your child growing up, that affects your connection to that person. So really, I think starting with an inventory is the best way. If you are keeping a log, I think that's been common across all our Facebook Live sessions. Keeping a log is the most important, because if you are concerned with stuff, is this part of the stroke? Is this part of natural aging? Should I be concerned with, dementia and Alzheimer's and things that run in my family? The only way a doctor can help you tease that out, and it's not an exact science, is if you have a log. Like, how often are these memory challenges happening? Okay. John says, Alzheimer's runs in my family, and I tell my spouse he is my brain. He had a stroke 8 years ago. His memory's good, but sometimes we watch a TV show and I say we saw it already. It takes him a few minutes to realize that we did see it. Is this typical of aphasia? It doesn't necessarily sound like it's a part of aphasia, but if you talk about like waking up with like we have one pot of reserves that we wake up with, and every single thing we do from the moment we wake up takes out resources, right? So eventually that pot is gonna be empty. And so in the grand scheme of things, is it the brain's highest priority to remember that you watched an episode already versus helping you remember something that you rely on him for, right? So it's like your brain is choosing, right? That being said, like, your spouse the best, he knows himself the best. So, you can have that discussion, and definitely your doctor should be tracking, obviously, family history. And if you are concerned, research is always changing. Strategies for maximizing your memory function as it is, and also going forward is always changing. So it's okay to have that. I mean, that's what doctor's visits are for, is to go over family history and to make sure you have tools that you feel comfortable with and that you understand to facilitate memory. I will say that real life practice, if you will, for memory is always going to be a lot better than looking at a computer and doing so-called brain games, right? Those measure performance in a very limited context for things that don't necessarily have personal meaning or connection to you. So your brain is going to perform in a way that's not as enriched and a reflection of real life performance as real life memory demands, such as remembering what you did yesterday, or being able to tell a story to like your grandchild, something about yourself growing up. Like, that's what's going to keep your memory the strongest and the healthiest, is using your memory. So tell stories, write down your stories if you don't have someone to tell. Really engage that part. Like, pick up a game that you learned when you were a kid that you haven't picked and see if you can, pick up the cues again. Teach a game to someone. Pick up a topic of interest again and see what you can remember, or teach it to someone. Again, engaging those memory muscles is what's going to help you retain that memory. Allison says, my memory is so good before my stroke. Now it is somewhat gone. I can remember the craziest things and then can't remember the important stuff. Yeah. That can seem weird, right? Like, why? What's the pertinence of this? With anything, when you're put on the spot and you're asked to remember something, that can impact your performance too, right? And if you're having trouble remembering and you get flustered and you're trying super hard, instead of taking a break, that's going to make it harder too, right? Forcing the issue is not going to facilitate it, or tends not to facilitate it. It's just like when you have tone in your hand, right, and you're trying to crank open that hand. A lot of people can maybe relate to the fact that it just wants to grip tighter, but versus if you do it in a slow, relaxed stretch manner, you're going to get more give. Same with any kind of performance. If you are struggling, take a breather. Forcing the issue is not going to retain it, or is not going to make things happen any quicker, because now you're adding a stress state. And when you add a stress state, performance is going to suffer. So, Aaron says, my pain meds affected my memory. That's a really good point, Aaron. So, keep track of starting new medications and any changes you've noticed, because side effects should be discussed at a doctor's visit, but sometimes they're not. And sometimes you can go over side effects till you're blue in the face, and something, you know, you're the one person or the rare group that experiences memory changes. So track when you start medications, track any changes you're noticing. The brain is complicated. I mean, we don't have it mapped out. We don't know one-to-one, you know, connections. And so anything that medication affects your brain. And so it's not outside the realm of possibility that anything that affects how your brain, medication that affects how your brain uses resources is going to have an impact on memory, because everything's, you know, we have multiple paths and redundancy of paths for a reason, so that if something is not working the way it should, or if something gets damaged, there's a backup system in place. And so when everything's connected, it increases, it's great in terms of neuroplasticity, but it can also be, you know, a bit of a bummer when it comes to trying to improve one thing without it affecting another. Good questions. Thank you so much for the comments and questions so far. Has anyone tried anything after their stroke that really made a difference for them? Please share. Sometimes people talk about like memory books. So if you are post-stroke and it's fairly recent and you're having trouble remembering, you know, who your different therapists and providers are, what your different medication is, all that stuff. They have, you can, just like when you buy journals, they have like different levels of detail in the journal. You can create a memory book, which can be as simple as a notebook, or you can have a caregiver or a loved one help you make one, right? Like, what's my schedule today? These are the names of my providers or everyone else that I encounter in my day. This is what I need to do today, right? Memory, like we're not meant to remember everything. That's why strategies and, like, you know, notebooks and journals and pens and pencils exist. We're meant to write things down. We can't be carrying all that information at the same time and keep it useful. So it's okay to use those strategies. Find what works for you. I am not a person who can put things in my phone. Like, even if I know something's in my phone, that's just, the phone and I are not like a natural match. So instead of fighting my natural pen and paper disposition, I've embraced it. Since I've embraced it, I've noticed a lot more improvement in my memory performance, because I'm not forcing myself into a system that doesn't resonate with me. I hope that makes sense. Okay. John says, can you talk about the medication that helps aphasia and mood? So that was, does it also help memory? So the medication discussion you want to have with your doctor, but also a great resource for discussing medications is a clinical pharmacist. So a lot of people don't know that you can make an appointment with your pharmacist to have the discussions. You can go through all your medications, you can talk about all the side effects, and you can make sure that, you know, nothing is impacting things in a way it shouldn't. So aphasia is the ability to either express, you know, verbally express or understand verbal communication. I don't know actually if there's a medication that specifically targets that. There are medications that target mood, whether it's anxiety or depression or sadness. That's a discussion you want to have with your doctor and or mental health provider. Now, I will say that medication that impacts mood tends to also impact memory. So you want to make sure you have a discussion. If you're already concerned about memory issues, you want to make sure you bring that to the table when you discuss things. Memory and attention, like we talked about in the beginning, are tied together. So you really want to make sure there's not going to be a medication, and if it says you want to be cautious, a medication is not going to 100% target memory without impacting something else, right? And there's going to be the payoff and a cost. So you really want to make sure, you know, some things that medication that improves attention and memory might also keep you awake at night, right? Because now your brain is like able to process more information, and that information needs to get processed, and so it comes at the expense of like your brain winding down. Versus something for mood, if you're able to feel less impacted by your sadness or your anxiety, whatever, does that free up resources for remembering things better? Or is it just because you're engaging in things more because you're feeling better and that engagement is working your memory muscle? Does that make sense? Like, medication is meant to work with you, not for you. And so that's the discussion best done with your doctor. Or a clinical pharmacist, I think, is a great resource. I just started using them, and they're obviously, medicine is what they do, right? And they have time, sometimes more than doctors, to go over the details. And they're the person who will know about contraindications and drug interactions and all that stuff. The best, again, I think I will echo it again, the best memory intervention strategy is using your memory. Medicine can't work on its own, but it is an important part of the toolbox for people. So make sure you have that discussion, at least know your options before you make a decision. Erin says, I couldn't see to write, so I did talk to text or a bard on my phone or computer. Writing it down helped me remember, and I rarely looked at it, but I had to do that. Talk to text, you have to be able to laugh or you'll cry. Yes, I agree. I will talk to text is becoming better, and I don't know if anyone's been following all the recent developments in artificial intelligence and AI. It's an issue that deserves its own conversation, but I will say that it has improved the talk-to-text technology and will continue to improve the talk-to-text technology that is available. So that is one way that can definitely serve people. Obviously, it doesn't come without its own cons, but talk-to-text is it's kind of one of those things that, universal access or universal design, where something that helps someone like a stroke survivor or someone else with a physical or cognitive change also is beneficial to a general population. And the more people realize that, the more time and money will be invested in technologies and services and strategies that make things user-friendly for everyone, not just anyone who had a stroke. So some of the talk-to-text, though, yeah, keep it for fun. You can always refer to it for a good laugh. If I haven't answered your question to your satisfaction, or you have a follow-up question, please let me know. Let's see. I don't think I've missed anything. I got it? Okay. So let's briefly talk about some types of memory. So we talked about sensory memory, which is, kind of just getting that information from the different sensory stimuli in the world. Short-term memory, small storage capacity, working memory is a part of that. That's where what's going on in your brain is just what you're working on at that moment. And then the longer-term memory is the one that's your larger storage capacity. So explicit memory is the memory that's like consciously recalled. So what is someone's name? How do you get from this place to this place? The stuff that we think of when we think of memory, usually more often. Remembering your childhood, personal experiences, where did you go to high school, things like that. And then implicit is the unconscious memory. So that's something like, things that have become automated, brushing your teeth, riding a bike. Like we don't sit on a bike and consciously think of how to remember to do it. We just do it if you learned how to ride a bike earlier in our life. It's performing actions without, conscious thought or awareness. Singing a song that you know really well. So both of those can be impacted. They interact with each other. And so again, when you're doing your log, like you don't have to know the fancy terms or the fancy language. Just write down what's happening, what you're not remembering, what you're remembering really well, and work with your, someone in your support network to kind of tease that out. Okay. Let's see. So I want to talk briefly about some of the things that are frequently described by stroke survivors, or that I've seen as a provider. So memory issues such as asking the same question over and over again, or getting lost in places that you know well, or having trouble following directions, becoming more confused about time, people, and places, so general orientation, forgetting to take a shower, forgetting to brush your teeth, hygiene, changes in personality or mood or behavior, problems with focus and concentration. So any of those things are things you want to track, right? In the beginning, it can be really frustrating to be with that, right? Like if someone's asking the same question again and again, it's frustrating as a caregiver or someone on the receiving end, but it's also, frustrating in a different way for the person who's asking, because they're reading your reactions too, right? And they're the ones who are having to rely on having to ask that question. So when there's not awareness of that I've asked the question already, there is awareness of the fact that they aren't able to answer the question themselves and have to make another effort. So it's a very exhausting, frustrating, and can be very unnerving at the beginning. So I would say, just like with anything else after a stroke, the earlier that you can set up your support network, the better. And write things down, right? Write things down for a purpose of recording it, so for later, reference, but also write things down because it's a way to like unload everything that's going on in your brain. And then save the teasing apart for a time that you're more able to have the bandwidth to do that. Trying to fix, quote unquote, fix everything, find a one-to-one connection in the beginning will burn you out. Everything is connected, everything, cause effect, like it's really hard to make those one-to-one connections except in really rare cases. So the best you can do is document and share your challenges. Okay. Any other questions or comments? So we talked a lot about, one of the comments was about medication, so I'm glad we talked about that. Other causes of memory loss we touched on, such as sleep deprivation. If your brain is working on other things related to sleep, not getting good sleep, it draws resources away from memory. Not nourishing your body with food that it agrees with and that processes it well, that just, contributes to inflammation, which again, anything that is going to put you in a state of having to deal with stress, whether it's perceived or unperceived, is going to draw resources away from memory. Being in pain after a stroke is more important to resolve for the brain than helping you remember where you put your keys every day. That's just how the brain works, right? It has to be efficient, it has to delegate, it has to prioritize. Then we have things like mood changes, depression, and stress. There's age-related changes in memory. All of us will have to employ strategies at some time. Our brain is just not going to perform the same way in anything physical or cognitive, and memory is a part of that. If you have a family history of dementia and Alzheimer's, definitely make sure your doctor is tracking that, so you can use that as part of your planning strategy for the future. John says, what about really short-term memory? I just took my pill. Did I take it? I still have the bottle in my hand. I drive away from the house. Did I tap to shut the garage door? Yeah. Those get, sometimes that can stem from memory just in itself. Sometimes that can stem from just anxiety about did I leave everything and check off everything on my to-do list? Now, one strategy that I've employed for remembering whether I took my medicine in the morning or not, because sometimes, and this is a bad habit because it's not consistency, sometimes I take my medicine as soon as I turn off my alarm. Sometimes I don't take it until I turn off my alarm, go to the bathroom, and then come back and take it. Not a good strategy because there's not consistency, and so I do forget. So one strategy that I've employed that has worked really well is as soon as I take my medicine in the morning, I turn the bottle upside down. So then when I come back to it later, I come in the bedroom later, it doesn't matter when I took it. If I see the bottle is upside down, I know I took it. And then I turn it right side up. Now that works for me, right? If you use a pill box, then when the pill is not in that compartment for the day, that means you took it. So really looking at what is going to be reassuring to you and a fail-safe for you that yes, I did take my pill. But yeah, like, you know, holding the bottle in your the pill bottle in your hand and not remembering if you just took it or picked it up to take it, that's more common than people think, because again, it's automated, right? Like picking up a pill bottle to do something, but then we get distracted, or we're thinking about something else, and then in that moment we blank on whether we took it. Sometimes if you're in the shower, did I just apply shampoo or was I thinking about applying shampoo? Like, it happens. Worst case scenario, you shampoo twice. Like, you know, some things have a bigger consequence than others, but the medication definitely. Pill box, so you see that empty compartment, or turning your bottle upside down. Another strategy that has worked for clients and patients that I've worked with is putting your pill bottle, especially if you have if you live with a partner and you have two sinks, putting your medication bottle in your sink, because you have to move it to turn on the sink. And so move it, take it, and then turn on the sink. Did I tap to shut the garage door? So that would be a strategy where you just, you know, you don't back out of the driveway until the garage door is closed. Again, I'm not, you know, that sounds simpler. I don't want to oversimplify it, because that is, you know, easier said than done, or it could be a duh strategy for you. I don't know. But think of what is going to give you the reassurance that yes, it happened. And for me, I'm a garage door person as well. I just I wait. I don't pull out until I see the garage door shut. Gail says, oh, one more thing, John. So, like, you know, those things about like really short-term memory, like working memory that you're talking about, think of like if there's a common thread, right? Like if medication is in the morning and leaving, you know, to go to work is a morning thing as well, in the garage door, those are states where you're like, you have tons to do, right? Like, I need to do this, this, and this. I need to get to work on time. I need to get out of the house at this. Like, there's a lot going on in your brain. So something is more likely to fall through the cracks when it comes to like that in-moment attention. So if there's a common theme, it's always happening when you have to get out of the house at a certain time. If it's always happening in the morning when you're still waking up, that's a, you know, that's an intervention strategy too, is awareness of that. Gail says, my family says I have no filter anymore when I get upset. So that is something that I've heard a lot. My last job was working with service members, and either with or without a stroke, one of the reasons that they would come to see me is that filter. Like, my frustration tolerance is super low. I say what I mean. I don't have that like intercept and taking a break. And part of the biggest aha moment that happens in those discussions, and it's only happened because I've learned from my patients and participants, not something that I knew naturally, is that if you think about what happens when we get put on the spot or overwhelmed, like if our pot of reserves is really low, and something comes at us that's too much, whether it's someone's tone or volume or sense of urgency, the quickest way to shut it down is to be a jerk. Is to just say the thing that's going to make it go away, or, you know, put a pause in it, or make someone walk away. Like, that is your brain's default strategy to shut things down as quickly as possible, because you don't have the bandwidth for it. And I'm not calling you a jerk, so I just want to clarify that. But it's true. Think about it. Think about the times that you like snap at someone and you reflect back and you're like, why did that happen? Like, was it the end of the day? Were you hungry? Were you tired? Was it, you know, coming off a stressful phone call or whatever? It's the brain's default. I'm having something coming at me. I don't have the resources to deal with it. How can I quickly remove myself from the situation? And having no filter is a common thread. So that's something I would look at. And then, you know, are there specific discussion topics or situations where your family is saying that? Because it's if that is consistently happening, then one strategy is like scheduling time, right? We schedule time at the end of the week to have a powwow and talk about the week, instead of having these drive-by conversations where someone is not mentally able to participate as well, and then you have a blow up or you have a misunderstanding. Schedule a time. We talk about things at the beginning of the day. We talk about things at lunch. We talk, like, do what works for you so that you show up as much as you possibly can, and you're less likely to have that defense response, which is what it is. Gail says, ha. It's usually in the evening. Yeah, at night, and again, it's just, we're always go, go, go. At night is the only time that people have to kind of reconvene and talk, but it's also the time you need to wind down for sleep, right? So it's really, you can see how it'd be not conducive to sleep to be in bed, where your brain is supposed to be associate being in bed with winding down, and being in bed and talking about what went wrong today, all the things on the to-do list for tomorrow, discussing the kids' schedule, discussing finances, right? So in the evening, if you know that that's a consistency and you're tapped out, move those conversations. Use your knowledge to make it work for you. The evenings are challenging. Finding a time that both parties can participate is challenging. One of the strategies that I've recommended for families and spouses or partners in relationships is you can find like family note-taking apps where you can share information and write down things as they occur to you. So that way, whenever they occur to you, you have a place to put them. Whenever your partner, spouse, whoever is relevant in your life is ready to process that information or do something with it, they have access to it, right? So everyone's accessing and looking at the information at the time that's best for them, which means the likelihood of them doing something functional with it is higher than if someone is coming, like, if you've been at home relaxing for half an hour and your spouse comes in just from work and they're like, oh my God, brrr, we have to do all this, and you've been relaxing, that like mismatch in energy is where the miscommunication happens. It's not because you're trying to, purposely roll your eyes or not pay attention. It's because everyone is literally in a different headspace. And so if you have a place to write things as they occur to you, you're not sacrificing your natural rhythm. And when it's there for your partner to receive it, they're not, they're there when they're the most mentally present. So that's one thing you can experiment with too. Aaron says, I've taken pictures just to prove to myself I really did it. So you're talking about like the garage door and taking the medicine. That's a good idea. You can do that. Karen says, wow, who knew? Hi, Karen. Karen is our amazing full-time volunteer at the mission location. We're very, very lucky to have her. Thank you, everyone, for your questions and comments. So we're about running out of time. So take-home messages. There's a lot more involved to memory than just memory itself. So memory performance is going to be affected by everything else in your life. So when you have a challenge or what you would describe as a symptom, take inventory of it, pay attention to the other fires going on. Did I sleep well? Did I eat? Am I hydrated? And then so you can have the clearest picture, the most accurate picture, if you will, of what your memory performance is. The best way to work your memory is to use your memory. Anything that promises, like do these exercises and, it'll give you whatever years back in your, like treat those, those games and those, they're not bad for you, but make sure you know what your goal is. What is my goal related to addressing my memory? And make sure you're doing something that facilitates that versus something that's just very, very specific to that intervention or that time itself. Okay, so next Thursday, our Facebook Live Q&A will be about aphasia. And I know aphasia was brought up today in the conversation, so it's a good segue. So we're going to just talk briefly about aphasia and the different types, but mostly it's going to focus on communication strategies. So how do you let your care, and both from stroke survivor to caregiver and caregiver to stroke survivor. What strategies are there to facilitate that initial adjustment period, and what tools and strategies can you have in your toolbox for communicating with caregivers or loved ones or medical providers, right? Anyone that's had aphasia knows how frustrating but also isolating it can be, right? If someone is not used to interacting with someone who communicates or understands information differently, it's very isolating, because then they tend to default, they talk over you, or they talk through you, or they talk to your caregiver. And if it's just aphasia, you know, that's your main symptom, that can be really frustrating, because you're there, you're a capable adult with decision-making capacity, and how do you set yourself up for success by having things at your disposal that can help people continue to interact with you in a way that maintains your dignity, autonomy, and self-efficacy. So that's what we're talking about next week. So please join us with your questions and comments. There's a link to a Facebook, to a forum online where you can submit your questions and comments in advance. Please use that if you're unable to type in real time when we're doing these at 11, because we want to make sure that this is value added for everyone. So last call for questions and comments related to memory. Forgetfulness happens. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong. It's just a natural function. If you didn't forget anything, that would be more concerning, actually. And I will put on this chat a link to that New York Times article I was talking about. And then also the strategy that I was talking about for college students, note-taking strategy. So maybe Google that, note-taking strategies for college students, because that helps with recall and stuff too. And you don't always have to, you know, I tell my students this when it comes to exams. Multiple choice is your friend, right? It means you don't have to remember things verbatim exactly how it is. You just have to know and recognize it enough. So that impacts how I take notes, and that impacts how I take tests, because it offloads that pressure. Do I know enough to recall it? Great. I'm not going to write it as a note, because otherwise everything in my textbook is highlighted, and when I'm studying, I end up rereading instead of studying. And that defeats the purpose. So the link didn't work. Oh, okay, John, the link for are you talking about the form, the comment question form didn't work, and you have to Google American Stroke Foundation? Is that what you're talking about? We will double check that link and make sure it works. You can always put your questions through our website, americanstroke.org. You can add questions to this chat, and we will go through them, or you can give us a call too. I don't know our number off the top of my head. 913-649-1776. 1776. See, I didn't remember. Full circle moment. Okay. That's another example, right? Like, the demands of our lives have changed, right? We have our phone for everything. We can look up things in an instant, usually. And so when's the last time you had to remember a number from memory? Like, when I was growing up, I knew my home phone number, all my best friends. Now, you know, good luck with that. Like, if I lose my phone, I know 911. That's it. But it shows, like, our brains change as a result of what's available in our experiences around us, and things are changing faster than ever. Whereas before, we would, you know, it'd be like 50, 100-year periods that, like, anthropologists can look back at how our brains have changed as a result of advancement in society. Now it's like shorter snippets. Things change so fast, and our brain is changing just as fast. And so, you know, again, if your brain knows you've got phone numbers and you can look up anything, it's not going to prioritize remembering that unless it's part of your job. So John says yes, so we will double check that form. Thank you, John, for letting us know. All right, thank you to everyone who joined us today. Thank you for the great questions and comments. If you have any further questions or comments, we have presentations and educational materials on memory and everything else we've talked about before, general wellness topics, sleep, nutrition, chronic pain. americanstroke.org will link you to all that information. Thank you very much. You're welcome, Christina. You're welcome, Gail. Okay. Take care. Bye, everyone.